All right, here we go. Welcome everybody to the Google Consent/cookie banner webinar. Our first webinar on this new platform. So please don't be very angry if I press the wrong button or I'm not really sure what's going on. I'll be doing a Google Consent webinar for all of you with questions about how to set it up properly. In this window, we have a chat feature in which you can post questions. We will go through the questions after the webinar and not during the webinar. So first we'll do a quick run through of all things regarding Google Consent, cookies, even hit on some server-side tagging for you. And then afterwards, you are welcome to post some questions in the chat, and we'll try to get them all if the time allows us. So what are we going to do today? We'll do a quick round of introductions of who is in our webinar from the CultureSuite site. Then we do a quick dive into cookies. Then we'll talk you through the Google Consent v2. What does it mean? How to set it up? We'll take a look at our cookie banner, because there has been a lot of questions and vagueness around if that's the correct way of setting it up. How does the cookie banner work? Does it work with Google Consent? Short answer is yes. Long answer will follow. Then we're going to look into connecting the cookie banner to the consent levels of the Google Consent version 2. Looking at a template that we provide to help you out on that and how to install that. And afterwards, if time allows, we'll do a little quick view to the future for server-side tagging and why that is an important item. Afterwards, we have time for some questions. So without further ado, I'd like to dive into this meeting. Today we have from the CultureSuite department, myself, obviously, I will do the main part of this webinar, but joining me today are Koen, who is our Chief Technology Officer, and Stu. Stu is our lead front-end developer. That will be around for answering questions after the webinar. We plan to have Jamie in here as well as our marketing manager, but currently his house is very much under construction. That means that all the drilling and the sawing noises coming from his angle were not acceptable. So we decided to kick him out of the webinar and leave the answering of questions to me and my other two colleagues, Koen and Stu. So that being the introduction, let's get right into it. First bit, the introduction to cookies. Hopefully nothing new for any of you. I hope we all have a bit of an understanding of what cookies are, but just as a quick run through. Cookies can be divided into first-party and third-party cookies. First-party cookies are cookies that are created directly by the website that you are using. So cookies are little scripts and fragments of information that the website sets on the computer of that user. So every time a user visits again, some things can be remembered. Some of these things are functional, like all the cookies that the Peppered platform sets on a user computer to remember people being logged in or shopping carts and stuff like that. Other cookies that are set on a computer can help you being tracked across different websites in case, in that case, you're actually talking about third-party cookies. So third-party cookies are not cookies that the Peppered website puts on a client browser to do simple things like remember you. Third-party cookies are actually set there by, well, third parties. That could be basic third parties like YouTube that sets a cookie in the client browser. If you are watching a YouTube film, a YouTube movie, it could be Facebook, it could be any other party that can leave a bit of code, a bit of script on the client computer. So next time that client goes somewhere else or loads the site again, that information is there for Facebook, for Google to pick up. So we're mainly talking about third-party cookies here today because third-party cookies require consent. Due to new data protection laws, third-party cookies are a bit under scrutiny. So there's a more strict policy regarding what is allowed. So you should obviously, as a user, be able to consent to third-party cookies or to decline third-party cookies. More on that later. And what we see now in the technology landscape is that more and more web browsers are actually trying and starting to eliminate third-party cookies. Biggest browser, Chrome, which is ironically from Google, has announced that at the end, by 2024, it will stop third-party cookies. Safari is already blocking some third-party cookies. So I think in the future, the landscape of cookies will change dramatically. And a lot of browsers will stop setting third-party cookies or some third-party cookies on the client computer, which means some data that you as a marketer would need or would want, or you as an advertiser would want, is getting harder to obtain and to work with. That being said, that's a quick introduction about cookies and the way that landscape changes. There's two phases here in the story. The first phase is actually the main part of what we're tackling today, which is March 2024. First thing we're going to look at is a DSA-compliant cookie banner. The Digital Services Act is a European framework of guidelines and laws that require a compliant cookie banner. We're going to make sure you all have them, and if not, no worries how you can set it up. And then the second topic that is actively hot right now is obviously implementing Google Consent Mode version 2 that is arrived here in March. So we're going to dive into that and how you do that. Things for later for everyone. I hope you have your notepads ready to write it down. But ideally, all tracking codes from third parties will be implemented through the magical words server-side tagging later in the future. That might mean this year, might also be next year. If you're not very heavy on third-party tracking and advertising, you might not even need it. But seeing the cookie landscape change, it might be worth diving into server-side tagging. Because that enables you to actually keep collecting the data that you do now, even when some browsers will block third-party cookies. So it's not a magical thing that creates more data. It's just a different way of doing what you do now in a changing landscape. Later, a bit more about that. First of all, and I think the main reason why we are here, Google Consent version 2. What is it? Google Consent Mode is not a standalone solution for managing user consent or cookie compliance. It's not a substitute for a consent management platform, which is a cookie banner or a cookie widget. Instead, you can think of Google Consent Mode as an additional feature to your cookie banner to ensure that Google tags and scripts match users' consent preferences. So what Google Consent actually does, it provides a set of rules, a set of tags that you can either allow or deny to be fired in your Google Tag Manager. But the way those tags are activated or deactivated relies on how your cookie banner works. So on the one hand, you need a good cookie banner that can get consent of people and then transfer that to your Google Tag Manager. And on the other hand, you got your Google consent tags that need to be aware of that. So in order to implement Google Consent Mode v2, we need a Google Tag Manager, because Google Consent is all about Google. It's about the Google Tag Manager, and it has been designed to be set up within the Google Tag Manager. So we're going to look at that. Also, what you need is a consent management platform. That's just an expensive word for a cookie wall or a cookie banner. Like what we offer with the Pepper platform, our own cookie banner is capable of connecting in a nice way with Google Consent Mode. So we're going to look at the cookie banner first, and then we're going to look at how to connect that to whatever is happening in your tag manager. A quick introduction on the details of the Google Consent version 2. What Google did is they said, well, we have 7 types of consent that we are working with in our tag manager. So we have 7 items that are either that a visitor of a website either allows us to be fired, to activate and to store and transfer information regarding certain purposes, or that should be disabled when a user doesn't give us that permission. So these 7 items you see here are the 7 consent types of Google Consent version 2. So they range from functional tags that just process functional information all the way to ad personalization and ad storage, and really going into that level of data sharing with third parties and other apps. So what Google wants us to do and wants everyone to do is to make sure that if a visitor of a website chooses to admit to activate cookies or to deny cookies, that all of these 7 consent types are set in the proper way, so your tag manager knows that it can either use or not use any one of these consent types that are available in your tag manager. So that's probably also why some of you receive some warnings within your tag manager saying, hey, the Google consent types are not properly implemented, because Google wants for every load, for every visitor, it wants to have a clear idea about what to do with these 7 consent types, if they can use them or if they should ignore them. So that's where the cookie banner comes in, because the cookie banner is the tool that's going to tell the tag manager which of those consent types can be used for which visitor. It all depends on the choice of the visitor. So let's look at the cookie banner first. You are probably all familiar with a very simple cookie banner. Actually, the first cookie banner we built maybe 10, 15 years ago, which is no longer valid in the EU. If you're in the EU and you still have a similar cookie banner like this on your website, you really should stop using it. That's because it has a dark pattern in it, and dark patterns are design elements that deliberately obscure or mislead website visitors to making unintended and possibly harmful choices. It's a bit heavy here on the wording, depends on what you actually do, but the idea is that our old classic cookie banner, which some of you might still use, has a bit of a dark pattern. That means there is a very bright accept button that wants you to click on it, and once you do that, you are actually accepting all cookies. If you want to make other choices, there is a small link here saying, I'm going to adjust my settings, maybe I don't want everything. But this pattern doesn't force you, but it really leans heavily on having actually one choice for a lot of people and tries to get most people to accept those cookies. That was a perfectly fine design for years and years, but the EU made some changes, and I think with good reasons, to look critically in the way this information is served. The way they did that, the EU created the DSA-DMA, so that's the Digital Services Act, Digital Markets Act, 2 laws. We're probably only talking about the Digital Services Act that is applying to how cookie banners should look. Digital Markets Act is for more of the big tech companies, the big marketing companies, the big web shops and stuff like that. But they are being used, the two terms, with each other. So the Digital Services Act aims to create a safer digital space for all internet users by giving online platforms a new set of rules. So what they did with these laws is come up with a set of rules that makes the internet more transparent and more fair. One of those things in there applies to cookie banners. So what the DSA tells us, it says cookie banner buttons for accepting and rejecting cookies must be equally weighted in terms of color, size, and placement. And this means that the accept button no longer may be more prominent or a different color than the reject button, and all options should be available in the first layer of the cookie banner. So it does translate into something. If you want to provide different choices for users, all these choices should be readily available and look similar within one view. You cannot entice a user with a button that is slightly more attractive or whatever tricks you use. It should be an informative choice that the user makes without any distraction. So if you're looking at a DSA proof cookie banner, which is also a banner that we've been serving for a couple of years now in the Pepper platform, it would look like this. We would have a cookie banner with a little bit of a text and then some small texts linked to the different option. And what you see here, we have a cookie banner with 3 options. One with the button saying allow all, allow limited, or functional only. So all the 3 levels that our current cookie banner provides are in here with the same button. So there's no looking around for extra features. There's not a lot of information that's overwhelming people. We designed our cookie banner to have 3 tiers, from functional only to allow all, with a middle one in between. And you can set it up as you want. You can add your text, you can rewrite all these texts. We provide a default text that we think applies to most of our clients, but you're welcome to change that text if it doesn't really match with what you're trying to do with these 3 levels. So the reason we chose for a cookie banner with 3 settings, well, the functional setting only is a logical choice. Maybe the allow all option is also a perfect choice, but we think a middle choice, which actually enables some cookies, is also a very good way to go about things. Specifically because what it says in the text here, this option allows cookies that enrich your experience, for example, media from third parties such as videos or Google Analytics statistics. Those are not strictly spoken functional cookies, because the website will function perfectly fine without media, without YouTube items, without Spotify playlists, and without Google Analytics. But there are also not really heavy tracking cookies that are used on multiple browsers. So there is a second button between the all and the functional only will make it easier for you to implement things that make the experience of the user more worthwhile on the site without having to force the person to allow all cookies. So we settled on this 3-tier setup. You see a lot of examples that have maybe a couple more tiers or have all toggles for 27 different kind of cookies. That is usually designed just to distract the user and to overwhelm the user and just to press whatever, select all, which is a bit of a dark pattern if you ask me. But we think 3 levels is enough. And you can't expect a user to provide consent for 20 or 15 different kind of things, because a user doesn't really know. So we trickled it down to 3. If you're really serious about your privacy, click functional only. If you want to have a richer web experience, and it explains it here in the text, for instance, with the social, the third-party media like videos and music and stuff, click that one. If you're perfectly fine with whatever happens, click allow all. So you can play with these three. Obviously, you can set them differently, provide different texts, but the main part is use a banner that looks like this, because then you are you are handling according to the DSA legislation. You can actually switch that on right now. So I'll wait 2 minutes for everyone to check their own website. No, just kidding. But in your control panel, there is a setting that is called cookie consent banner compliance. If you switch that to yes, your old cookie banner, which looks like the old one, should change into this one. Obviously, once again, make sure that you agree with the text. It's just a default setup of text. You can change them if you want to reflect the settings in your Google Tag Manager, if they are any different than what's listed here. So these three settings, going forward, we will mention 4 levels of consent. So I'll mention them here. Level 0 is no consent is given yet. When you press the functional button, you get consent level 1. When you press limited, you get consent level 2, and there is consent level 3. So there's actually 4 levels, with the 0 being I have not made a choice yet. That will be important in the future slides. So what does your Peppered platform website do when you press one of those consent levels? It's very easy. If no consent is given, we still set functional cookies. Functional cookies may be set at all consent levels, and we need them to keep track of what you're doing on the site, based on actually helping you to being able to shop on the site and stuff like that. So what the Peppered website does is set functional cookies to make sure that the website works and is a positive experience. So we set them directly, and when you only choose for level 1, which is functional cookies only, those are the only cookies we will allow the website to be set. If you choose to allow a limited amount of cookies, so that's version 2 or level 2, we also introduce third-party content that is posted in dedicated media fields and iframes. So everywhere where you provide content, like a YouTube video link or a Spotify embed playlist in an iframe or in a dedicated video link, all that content is only shown when the user has allowed limited in their cookie banner. If you only allowed functional, you will see that YouTube movies will not play. Also in your slideshow or in the dedicated fields, it will give you a little text box and say, hey, you didn't consent to third-party media. And you can give your consent nevertheless again, so you are able to see that. So yeah, that's something that is embedded really deeply within your Peppered website, is every place that you put a third-party social, not social, but third-party media like video and audio. We only allow that script to load when at least level 2 permission is given, and level 3 obviously. There is one little asterisk here, because we cannot prevent third-party media cookies if they are embedded in your text editor. So your HTML text editor, the WYSIWYG editor, it has a source code editor, so you can actually put a lot of embed code in there. We can't stop that, and we cannot really check on that. So if you're putting media embeds in your text editor, they will probably already be loaded when the user doesn't give consent. So third-party cookies will be set on the user's browser without permission. That's why we have dedicated fields for for YouTube, Vimeo, for Spotify. That's why we have the dedicated iframe, which only loads these third-party scripts when the proper admission has been given in the cookie banner. When you look at the third level, it doesn't really change for the Peppered website. We still provide the third-party media, but there's no extra cookies that we load to track you, because the Peppered site in itself doesn't track people outside of the Peppered website. It doesn't do any of that. What it does do on level 3 is load the tag manager and set the Google consent types to level 3, which is the highest amount of freedom that Google is going to get. Same goes for level 2. If a user selects allow limited in the cookie banner, we will load the Google Tag Manager and set the consent levels to level 2. I'll explain what those levels exactly mean in regards to Google consent. What you see here is that in level 0 and level 1, we defaultly don't load the Google Tag Manager yet, because we consider the Google Tag Manager not a functional, a part of functional cookies. So in level 0 or 1, in a default setting, the Google Tag Manager is not loaded. We do, however, offer the option to always load the Google Tag Manager regardless of cookie consent. That's just a toggle in your control panel in your dashboard. When you switch that on, you will see that we will always load the Google Tag Manager, even in level 1, in level 0, but we make sure that the Google consent types are set to a level 0, and the same goes for level 1. We can load the Google Tag Manager. You can already activate tags in the Tag Manager, but make sure you only load tags that are properly set to functional only, so no other data should be tracked, but that's really the responsibility of the one working with the Google Tag Manager. So usually we only load it on level 2 and 3, but there is an option to also load it on level 0 and 1. All right, so we discussed cookie banner. What happens next? We're going to look at Google consent. And we have help from a template that you can download from our new community environment. It's also still available in Freshdesk in the knowledge base, but we're now moving everything from the knowledge base over to this. So this link will be sent to you after the webinar. But we created the template to link the cookie banner to the Google consent levels. So reiterating, these were the 7 consent levels that Google requires us to form an opinion about, to either allow or to block. And we made a mapping to map all these Google consent types to the 3 settings of our cookie banner. So security storage is actually the only Google consent type that doesn't require any permission at all, because it's a very functional cookie. Then you got the functionality storage. That's a cookie banner level 1 functionality, if you will. Then the personalization storage is a level 2. It sounds a bit scary, personalization story, but it's actually about storage related to video and other stuff. So it is rather harmless. And that's why it is a level 2 consent type, just like analytics storage. The add personalization, add user data, and add storage are 3 consent types that are heavily connected to advertising and to cross website browsing. So they will only be activated in the tag manager when people are selecting the all button on the cookie banner. So what we did here is we mapped our own 4 consent levels to the 7 consent types from Google. So if you press one of the buttons on your cookie banner, a subset of these consent types will be activated. This is what you will see then in your tag manager after install. So when you load your tag manager always, and there's a new visitor that hasn't given consent yet, this is what happens to all the the Google consent types, only the security storage is granted. And then you got your level 1, 2, and 3, and you see more and more of the Google consent types are granted, as they call it, in the tag manager. And with all these tags, either in a denied or a granted state, you can add all your tags that you add in Google Tag Manager, all your other marketing tools. You can connect them to these Google consent types. They are available in your Google Tag Manager always, and what Google wants you to do is connect all the tags that you set up in your Tag Manager to one of these consent levels. And by using the peppered cookie banner, you make sure that the correct subset of Google types is being denied or granted based on the cookie banner. So once again, there's some more information if you want to deep dive into it in our service desk. But this is how we map the cookie banner to the 7 Google consent types. How are we doing that? We do that with a template. So once again, we provide a template for you to download in our community hub, community.culturesuite.co. You can download a template there that you can install in your tag manager, and this template does a one-on-one mapping with the 3 consent levels of our cookie banner to the 7 consent types of your Google consent version 2. So it's being set up as a default mapping that we think will serve 80%, maybe 90% of our clients. If you are very serious about your marketing, about your third parties, about your advertising, and you have a lot of know-how, you probably set it up by yourself or you have a partner that does it for you. But I think most of our clients will benefit from this template as it has a proper connection and a proper alignment from our basic cookie settings to Google consent types. So I'll do a quick run through here. I don't want to teach you how to install that very detailed. Once again, you will get this slideshow afterwards or the video. But what you basically need to do is a couple of steps. You need to install a new template in your Google Tag Manager. That's what you do here. Then the next step is to import that Pepper template that you just downloaded from the CultureSuite Hub. Import that into your Tag Manager. And afterwards you can select that one and activate it. You have to set up the tag so it will ensure the template code runs whenever users interact with your website. So after you upload the template, you have to set up a tag, and after that you have to set up the trigger that tells you when that tag is triggered. So it's a couple of steps, but it's not a lot of work because we did a lot of work for you while building that template. If you did that, the cookie consent has been set up successfully. So the result is that your cookie banner with their 3 buttons will translate correctly to activate or deactivate the 7 Google consent types within your tag manager. After you did this, you're ready to go. And you can work with those 7 consent types in your tag manager. Obviously, it is a default setup. You can change that afterwards if you know what you're doing, or if you have a partner to do that. You can choose to activate more Google consent types in the first phase, or in the second phase, or the third level of your cookie banner. But make sure you also adjust the text in your cookie banner to reflect what's actually happening, because people that are selecting consent levels in your cookie banner need to know what exactly they are giving consent to. So you can tweak this if you want, but we think the basic setup of the Pepper template will be suitable for most of our clients. If you want to dive deeper into that, or you want to have a proper look at your Google Analytics setup, or go further with Google advertising or other campaigns regarding the tag manager, regarding analytics, We have a partner network set up for that, because here at CultureSuite, what we like to do is focus on features and functionalities of our own web platform, and make sure that that all works and that's all perfectly in shape and working on new features. Whenever all the data is in the tag manager, there's a lot of knowledge to be found. That's not our main focus. So that's why we have a partner network. So you're more than welcome to reach out to one of our partners when you want to do a deeper dive into anything relating to online advertising and stuff like that. So 3 of our partners here are One Further, Afdeling Online, and Mondo Marketing. And we can hook you up with either one of these partners depending on your needs and wishes. So just reach out to us via the service portal, and we will hook you up with one of our partners if you are serious about taking a next step in your online marketing or advertising. Also, something I wanted to mention is alternatives, because the Google Tag Manager and Google Consent Mode are all heavily inspired by Google. Well, there is actually a world outside of Google. So there are other companies that also specialize in analytics for your website, in providing insights in what the traffic does on your website, what the people do, how to improve your websites without being bound to the Google network. So if you're looking for alternatives, or you're doubting that the Google network is the best choice for you, it is obviously based in the USA. Google can be found to be very intrusive with the way they share data. If you are not comfortable, or you're not sure if you want to proceed with that, just know that there are alternatives on the market. Matamo is a good one, Piwik Pro is another one, but there are more that provide a similar kind of analytic container and platform for you to provide insight to you what's actually happening on your website, but in slightly different approaches. So don't be stuck in Google if you don't want to. I know there's a lot of benefits in the Google landscape regarding grants and stuff like that, which is heavily used in the cultural sector. But just in case you are wandering around, there are alternatives that you could certainly dive into. That being said, that concludes our first part. So we've looked at cookie banner, we've looked at Google consent levels, we've looked at how to match the cookie banner to the Google consent banner with a template. So the last little bit of information here before I go to the questions is about server-side tagging, which is a word you hear a lot lately. So what does it actually mean? Server-side tagging, I'm just going to read this from screen actually. Most websites use Google Tag Manager to implement scripts. By default, this is client-side. It means that when a visitor loads a page, a script is triggered, and it happens in the user browser. Well, we all know now that in the future that will likely be more difficult and difficult. So with regards to phasing out these third-party cookies and improving user privacy, Google has also launched a server-side version for Tag Manager. This is hosted on your own server and is therefore no longer dependent on third-party cookies. So what does this mean? To me, it means that by having the Google Tag Manager on a server, it is no longer a third-party cookie that needs to be set on a client side, because that server is owned by you, by the first party, by the theater. So that means that you can still set all the cookies that you used to set, even if browsers are blocking third-party cookies. If your visitor still gives you permission through the cookie banner, you can still set these cookies in a server environment owned by you instead of on the client computer. It is not a wonder pill, it's not magic, it doesn't provide new sources for extra information, it doesn't circumvent it, because you still need to set the proper consent levels. If a user only accepts functional cookies, It doesn't matter if you have server-side tagging. Everything, the data that goes to the cloud and to your server-side tag manager will still need to work with the consent that a visitor has given. So the only thing that server-side tagging does is, in case browsers block third-party cookies on a client's computer, instead of needing that cookie on the client's computer, it's going to set that cookie in the server in the cloud, and works from there, and there reads out the proper consent levels, and starts working with that. So it is a bit of a workaround to make sure that the proper cookies are still being set, even if browsers no longer support third-party cookies. A bit of a long and technical story. What it does, it improves your website's loading time, because in the user browsers, there's no longer a lot of scripts running in the tag manager, applying all sorts of things on the user's computer. They claim you have more control over what data you send to parties such as Google and Meta, because there's an actual direct link between the website and the cloud. It bypasses most ad blockers, but it's not very easy to set up server-side tagging. We're not going to dive into it today, but it is a bit of a hassle. Obviously, Google has their own cloud platform, which you can use, or look into third parties such as Stape.io that also provides a cloud platform. Benefits, in short, it enhances privacy and security. I think what they mean here is that when you start setting cookies on a client computer, there's a lot of data, maybe personal data, going forth and with between the website and the client computer. If a client has malware on their computer, that data could be intercepted maybe by another third party. So there could be a data breach there. Once you implement server-side tagging between your website and the server, then in theory, no malware from a visitor can get in there and catch that data or read that data. So it is supposed to be more secure in that department. Also improves data reliability. Not really going deep into what that means, because I'm no expert in that, but it does increase control over data, and it has really flexible integration capabilities. I'll just have to believe that. The easy way to implement server-side tracking, there's always costs involved, obviously, because now you need a server to implement that. If you're looking at a standard Facebook conversion API or something like that, it could run you into $10 a month for a simple setup. If you are really serious about an entire Google Analytics 4 or other implementation, a complete server-side implementation could run anywhere between $20 and $100. So you need to be very serious with your third-party advertising and stuff like that if you really want to go that route. If you're not big into third-party advertising, but you're only in it for the analytics and the second level and the first level, you probably don't want to bother with transferring to a server-side solution. Once again, you can look into Stape.io for this. We have more information about this, but I think in the future we will likely do a dedicated webinar all for server-side tagging. When we are a bit further, we got some more information. I know Jamie has been working on a blog about server-side tagging, which we will release in the near future as well, with some more information about this.
I think there's the key point to add on there, Ivo. You don't need server-side tracking to run adverts. You can still run adverts without it, but it's that kind of enhanced super targeting of adverts based on user habits that require those cookies that you'll have limited functionality in the future.
Yeah, that's
Basic
true.
advertising campaigns will still work without server-side tracking.
Yeah, that's true. That's a good way to add to that. So no stress there. Yeah, good points too. Thanks. I think it is also the last slide of this webinar. So that's nice. We finished in 3/4. I'll open up the chat windows and see if there's any questions here. I'm not currently seeing any questions in the chat. So either way, there's nobody here, or I made myself perfectly clear, or people need some time to digest and come with their questions later. Yeah, well, if there's no further question, then it's a very simple matter of thanking everyone for your presence. I'm sure everyone received the newsletter about our new culture hub that we are launching as CultureSuite, which will be a place where you can find a lot of information about the platform, about what we do, but it's also meant as a new social place where we can interact with each other, ask questions, raise topics, and start discussions about anything that we all care about in this sector. So feel free to join us there. Feel free to reach out to any one of our customer success managers if you have any questions about this topic, and I hope you learn a lot about it. If you want to do one thing today, make sure to click to check your your cookie banner, and make sure you have a compliant cookie banner, because it is time for that to use that. All right, I thank you all for your presence here, and looking forward to seeing you again in the future for a new webinar. Thanks, Stu. Thanks, Koen, for being here. And I'll see you guys next time.